So the first thing I wanted to know was like how you started working with flowers, and just like a little bit of background about like, your journey.
Sure. Well, so it sort of happened on accident. I mean, I've always thought like going for hikes and like found the beauty in nature to be something kind of special to me. But I was working as a barista, so I got a job in a flower slash plant slash coffee shop. And it just so happened that the place that I was working with, they were like 100% no foam, tried to be as sustainable as possible. They never like bulk ordered everything. And there's just a few like key things that they did that I really took with me from that like very first flower shop job into when I started freelancing and then also working for a handful of other shops. So it started that I was actually just doing the coffee thing. And then when I started working with them, it was build your own bouquet style. So picture like the little flower buffet where you pick out stem by stem, and then I kind of get to like on the spot make hand tied arrangements. So
Mhm.
from then I started, really looking up like we'd get the same flowers pretty often at the same times a year and kind of realizing the themes quickly is that, oh, this time of year, this is what we get the most of that looks the best. And that's because we tried to get a lot of local stuff, which was pretty cool. And I realized a very big difference from when I stayed there for a couple of years until they actually closed. And one of the owners, she moved upstate and like started her whole own flower farm. So it's very cool. She would be someone pretty
Wow.
neat to talk to and maybe super helpful for this project that you're doing. But yeah, I definitely noticed, I think because of my start being with people that thought about the sustainability aspect, when a lot of people maybe weren't so much caring about that. It just, flower design goes back to, I mean, like most event work, it's super, super wasteful just because, you use things for an hour, sometimes maybe five, and then everything gets thrown away. So you got to think about what you're using and what happens to what you're throwing away. And I think there's a big disconnect if you're buying flowers from far away, getting everything shipped right to your shop, as
Mhm.
opposed to someone that literally meets and knows the farmers. So we
Mhm.
had even a couple drop offs when it was the season in New York where the flowers directly would come to us and they would bring us like a handful of this flower in season, a handful of this one. So I think if I didn't work in that shop, I don't know where I'd be at this point. But it definitely gave me a really good base for just the connection between the flowers and the people selling it.
Mhm. Did that in itself also change how you view living organisms and like the natural world as a whole? Like the fact that you work so like directly with like this like flower?
I mean, definitely in like more than one way, like the connection with nature as well as the connection with just like the people, like the farmers in that way. For one, I am so obnoxious to go on a walk with pretty much any time of year, but especially in the spring. You can ask my partner. He knows way too many flowers by name and plants by this point, all the native ones, because as we're walking around now, I see things differently. It's without looking at the calendar, I can basically tell what time of year it is by what's growing. So,
Mm.
have you spent time in Greenwood Cemetery?
I've been there. I've been there a few times. It's
Definitely, yeah, worth a little journey. Just because that's one of those places. It usually was between where I was working and where I lived.
Mhm.
So I guess as far as connection with nature, even though of course it's a man-made
Mhm.
thing, the cemetery, they're super thoughtful there about planting specifically only native plants.
Mm.
About the flower arrangements that they bring in, they try to be pretty strict about please don't bring in foam, please don't bring in this type of thing or things wrapped in plastic. But when you walk through there, because they plant seasonal and they also do, forget the word for it, but where they essentially let parts of it kind of become overgrowth, so that it, like the pollinators and the bugs that are supposed to hibernate, they have a
Mhm.
place to do that. So when I walk through there on my way to and from work to home all year long, it's like at some point most of everything dies, but you start to see the first things that come up are the crocus. The second things to come up are going to be the daffodils and the just like it's really, I think about, I guess, the time of year now a lot differently in connection with what's happening in nature and what starts sprouting and then when it dies. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I definitely that's a way that I look at the natural world a lot more closely and differently than I used to just never think about it. I didn't really think about when I'm going to the store the flowers that they were selling and how that was relevant to like what literally locally was being grown. Now I can recognize looking at like other florist designs, I can see that is 100% shipped from the other side of the world because we don't get that this time of year. And to me, it makes it not special, but different, very different. I appreciate when people use what they can and the resources that they have and trying to make an impact with that. So as far as like when I'm going to be using products and stuff, I think about, well, how you treat things outside for one. So, I mean, even when it's not to do directly with plants, but about recycling or disposing of waste, of things like this, the carbon footprint of having things shipped, I really think about that pretty often. So even though I would like to get things, very specific flowers sometimes, I'm come to terms with I'm not going to have peonies all year long, even though someone requests them. So for me, I make a lot of adjustments like that when people request for work and stuff now. I'm like, that's just not my thing. I can send you to someone that may be open to that, but here's another option. So I guess I try and respect nature in the way that I, when I'm booking work, especially, I try and just kind of like educate people without trying to be too pushy.
Mhm.
Trying to educate them why they can get certain things certain time of year and just the impact of if they went in the direction that they think they want, but they're not the florist or the grower, so they might not necessarily think about or know, and that doesn't mean that they necessarily don't care about their choices and their purchases.
From your experience when you've talked to people about that, has there been like a positive reaction to?
Most often than not, there's once or twice. I mean, it's like the case of the bridezilla, where where it'll just be someone that they want someone to make something they saw in a magazine like to the exact detail. So they'll have an idea, and there's nothing wrong with having your dream wedding or event in your mind, but some people will be stubborn on I need 8,000 sunflowers and it's the middle of December in New York. And
Mm.
I try and steer them a different way and try and come to like a middle ground. But some people don't want to hear it, and that's totally okay. I always, like, unless someone's really awful, I'm pretty open to giving referrals to other people that maybe flex in a different way or could just, make something happen for them that I'm not willing to budge on, which I guess still has people purchasing things out of season then. But I want people to get what they want. But most often, honestly, it's usually really good, and it's people appreciate like making the effort to try and get something that's going to like support local economy. It's just, yeah, honestly, something that I think people don't think of. Like the first thought when they're thinking about decorating for the event, they don't think that it really matters. They're so used to seeing all different types of flowers all year long. It just seems so accessible, and they don't think about the 15 steps in between to get here. From the growing in like Holland is a big supplier for us in New York. Grow in Holland, the packaging, all the machines it takes to make things in bulk quantity in order to ship the demands like across the world. It's like just the supply chain people don't consider. And when you're like, well, there's the benefits of local stuff being, first of all, that carbon footprint. It's going to be much less because things aren't going to be shipped. The packaging is going to be less, this, but trying to spin it in a way, because not everyone, thinks about the environment that much somehow. Uh, Spin it in a way that, and it is pretty honest, I think, and almost always true. If you get something local, it's going to be more fresh. It's going to be usually more interesting looking. It's going to be something you can only get for a short part of time in your part of the world. It's a little more personal because it's something from where you are. And usually the cost is better because there's 15 less different, companies that you have to deal with, the shipping, the growers, the packaging. So just saying, hey, you can get more for less. And then it's probably going to be better quality, and you don't risk getting things that either get stopped in customs, which happens a lot to florists that order from international growers, as well as, yeah, just the damage that happens when you're shipping and stuff like that. So most people are but you're like, oh, that's super interesting. And yeah, more for less money sounds great. And they get to feel good about like contributing to something in their own backyard, essentially. So I
Mhm.
think people that reach out to me, especially at this point where it's been a couple years doing this on my own now, where they've reached out to me because what they're searching is literally like trying to be sustainable, trying to be local, and just the personal connection I have with certain farmers.
Mhm.
If you go local, you definitely it's a little easier. I like knowing where my flowers come from, and unless I'm planting it myself, I can only get so far. But working in the farmers market and literally talking to the owner of the farm,
Mhm.
there's a lot more transparency.
Yeah.
So
I was interested to hear about how you create these floral displays. Like, what is your like artistic process like? And also, I mean, you could also mention the jewelry that you make. Like, what are like the steps to that? Yeah.
Well, I feel like I should precursor with. So I try to be as sustainable as possible in my work, and that was definitely a building throughout time. So I wasn't always, sometimes I picked up jobs freelancing for other florists where honestly it felt the worst afterwards because I wouldn't have control over like the materials we use and stuff. So just to like precursor that I definitely started at a place and now I'm at the part where I don't say yes to certain florists because they work in a way that I don't feel good about, like environmentally. And then yeah, just things like that. So not perfect, and sometimes I do use stuff that is shipped internationally, but I don't. There's a few things I do like I don't order ahead. Every event is super different, and even for weddings, sometimes you'll see themes. So I always start with a phone call if I can't have an in-person meeting. Like if someone, typically people reach out through email, and whether it'll be like someone referenced them that I've worked with before, or they literally just came across my website. People usually reach out sometimes with like zero details of their event other than maybe a date if I'm lucky.
Mm.
So the date honestly is very important for me because when I'm thinking about if someone, let's say I have a wedding in June actually, they reached out last June and they were like, hey, we're thinking about could we work together? What sort of things can you get that time of year? So I think of the month and what's going to be growing and what's going to be accessible specifically for their time of year. So always depending on the date of the event is where I try to start. When it gets to be events and stuff in the winter months, it's a little bit harder for the local stuff, but it's pretty much always a season. So that's kind of where I start as far as even approaching a design or what materials we might want to use. It's going to be like, all right, what's growing during that time frame, and then I just start looking up what can cohesively, what kind of an event it is. So so my wedding that I have in June this year, just for an example, they love like bright colors. They sent me a bunch of pictures of these very abstract paintings from two different painters they loved. So sometimes people come to me with like half a baked vision, and that's really great because then we collaborate together in a way that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of on my own. So they went with really bright pops of contrast colors, but they don't want anything super chunky. And so it's a lot of conversation. So I like to really work one-on-one with like a client or a couple. I don't ever see myself being the kind of florist that I work 3 weddings in a weekend and I have a massive team. And as much as I do, want and need to make money like everyone else, I don't think, even though I want to keep doing this as a job, I don't think I'll be on that scale ever because that connection with the person I'm working with, it just becomes so faded and
Mhm.
less personal.
Yeah.
So I like to learn something about the couple, just a lot of communication. So I think for me, that's probably where all the designs start.
Mhm.
Every once in a while, there will be something very specific where someone gives me a limitation, like I need it to be in this color palette because that's the 3 colors of our company. So we want teal, green, and white. And I'll be like, okay, what can I get that's in those colors at that time of year? And looking at, let's say this company, it's a makeup company, what's their kind of aesthetic?
Mhm.
And so usually it's very personal. Like I think you'll see a theme in a lot of my stuff with like kind of strange elements being used, like sometimes vegetables or plants in addition to just like the big focal flowers. Just because that's kind of, I guess that's what draws me in is stuff that is a little bit more, I mean, it's all natural, but something you can picture growing in your immediate area. So I
Mhm.
guess that's sort of the start of it. A lot of communication with the clients, and then again, just thinking about what seasonal really does. I think getting like these questions and thinking about what you're working on now, I didn't think about it so much before, but it's definitely what I think about every time I'm starting a new project.
Mhm. Like, do you feel like you have a relationship with the living arrangements? What do you think like your role and like what role are like the arrangements taking? What do you think your role is? What is their role? Yeah.
Um, I mean, I just kind of want to bring beauty to people's like special occasions. So it's really cool to be a part of something so important and like once in sometimes once in a lifetime, like for a couple or something. I think that's really cool. So that's more my focus. I love flowers and I love plants. I don't know if maybe I'm not artistic enough to give them their own personalities, but I think there's different styles of flowers that give me different feelings. That's for sure. So there's certain things that like I appreciate in the wild that I absolutely don't want to use in arrangements sometimes just because like they're like I think they won't live very long, and I don't really want to take something out of nature that can only be for 2 seconds in a vase. I really think about often. I guess my relationship with the flowers is how long can I have them and how many different ways can I use them?
Mhm.
So for me, I've got a bunch of things I started planting just in my house by seed this year, and then some like little starter plants for herbs. And
Mhm.
I was kind of thinking about, I mean, what can grow here? What can I use for food, as well as what can I use in designs, and what can I dry? So for me, like the jewelry that like how we met at the market and stuff, that's just from I have trouble letting go of the flowers. So
Mhm.
I feel like they can last twice as long fresh cut in a vase if you take care of them in the vase. So if you're changing the water, cutting the stems, don't have them in the sun. Like I love sharing that knowledge with people because sometimes people think an arrangement will last 3 days and then it'll look dead, but it's just from not like paying attention to it. So I think about that all the time. You try and respect your flowers like that, and then I the little scraps that fall off or the necks or like sorry the heads that pop off of the flowers and they're still so beautiful. It's like okay, I might put that in a floating dish, or if it's small enough, I'll press it. And that's why I ended up starting to make the jewelry. Is well, I saw some jewelry that was very pretty, but never quite right to like something that I would wear. So for one, I wanted something I like to wear. Two, I just thought this is a good way to use the scraps that I have stuck in every single book I have, and maybe like sometimes they'll have a memory with it then. So I always take a notebook with me when I go on travels. So there's lots of like little rings and necklaces I have where I'm like, oh, that's from that weekend in Boston, or this one is from when I did my first wedding,
Mhm.
or stuff like that. Ideally, I would like to be able to give like a little memento like that that lasts for forever, but like long term for a client. So I like to dry flowers, but those aren't forever. But it is nice to be able to appreciate something fresh and then for like months and months be able to also have it like hanging dry or used in something else. So I guess I don't know. My relationship, could you say it's clingy? Because I never, because I never want to throw them away. I don't know if that's part the guilt of wasting something and cutting it, and technically killing it in order just to look at it inside. I don't know. I'm torn. I often feel very silly, taking stuff directly from nature and then making making an installation inside that looks like a living plant with stuff that I literally killed in order to put it inside. Taking a tree from outside to then put it inside feels very, you know. So
Mhm.
there's some things I do to try and ease that guilt as well as just make it less harmful. So like composting and disposing of things properly, or just extending their life that we appreciate them for. So I guess I do think about that quite a lot.
It's just interesting how people hold on because I do the same thing. Like I'm also always like pressing flowers and I'm just like, oh, this looks really cool. Let me look at this like forever. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So, and it's interesting also because of the fact that like so many, well, all of us in our own way, like do all this like harm, but then on top of that, we're like, oh, let's keep the pretty things. Um, so I
That
mean,
was true.
it's nice to be like conscious of it for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I think nobody does it perfectly.
yeah.
So there's always small things we can do, especially if we're using things in such bulk quantities sometimes.
Mhm.
It's important to think about like how you're disposing of things. And then also sometimes just a lot of saying no to when people make requests that are something that would be outside of like your ethos or what you're comfortable with. I've had in freelancing, I've probably freelanced for over 20 different florists. So when I say freelance, I mean it's someone else's wedding. They plan the whole thing. They get all the payments, and then I'm just an hourly. Sometimes I'll show up for 2 days. I'll show up to help do the prep of the flowers and the design. Sometimes it's literally just at the venue for the wedding, and you help set everything up, build the installations. So I've had too many times towards my beginning freelancing career where I'd be working for someone for the first time, and I'm just like, all right, so are we gonna stay to do the breakdown? And they're like, no, they'll get rid of it. And I was like, well, how do you know what they're you're not gonna keep any, first of all, the mechanics you used? So like
Mhm.
giant towers of chicken wire
Mhm.
or like tons of foam. So I'm sure you probably did a lot of research about flower foam,
Mhm.
because that's like the history of flowers. That's a big thing, and I think it's great. Some people are turning away from that now, but it has like major health impacts to the people that touch it, use it. So that goes all the way back to like the people that are literally the companies for that. But all the designers, they're freelancers being in contact with that. I physically can feel it after using that. So working an event, someone has just like pounds and pounds of foam. They don't even know how they're going to throw it away. They said the event venue, they'll take care of it. So they don't care.
Mhm.
As well as just like the over ordering. So how many events I've done where we finished all the setup and there's literally a truck filled, like half filled with 20, like the quantity of tree branches. So like 20 trees worth of branches. Like, what are you going to do with that? It's already cut, and they could potentially like pay someone a lot to compost it, but more often than not, they find a place to dump it.
Mhm.
So whether or not that's a place they should dump it or trash it, but it's the idea of having someone go through the labor, literally like just cutting down and killing all of that, and like the carbon footprint it takes to do that. It's just that really wore me down working for certain other people, and so that's just a random tangent, but but now I work much differently now than I used to.
How do you see like sustainable florists in comparison to like the, I guess, majority? Because it still probably is a majority, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel positive, like pretty like uplifted by the idea that at least a lot of people I've met now are trying to turn away from some things like flower foam, even though it's a convenience thing. It's a lazy thing. Like it's so much easier to it's going to stick a flower in there, it's going to stay where you put it. Whereas if you're making an abstract like structure out of like chicken wire, it's more flexible, or even just random containers that you'll reuse. It's
Mhm.
a little bit more like adjusting and finicking. So I feel like there is still people that will always go to that as long as it's legal to buy that. I think at some point there should be enough like rules about like what's harmful to humans as well as like what's bad for the environment that hopefully there's like stricter regulations on it, that there isn't yet. But I feel pretty positive because I've met a lot of people at this point that at least try, to be conscious and aware. And, also there's part of like, there's trends, like, and I think seeing and hearing someone say they're sustainable and being able to say to your wedding guests, oh, well, I went with the sustainable this. I think people feel good about it the way that they felt good about buying organic things or buying things at the farmer's market, which is whether it's not because they think it makes them sound good and a good person, that's great. That is making you a slightly better person from caring. Even if, it's an image thing to start, I think some people really do care. Um, I don't know if everyone, especially the unfortunate part is that larger florists and larger companies, they have to, if they're not properly staffed or if they're not at a place where they have, enough wage to spend the time, larger companies that have a budget for stuff like that, that they have the budget to pay someone like me as a freelancer to go there at midnight, to pick through all the stems out of your reusable chicken wire, to take that back to your studio, to pay for my time and my labor, to save you all your water picks. Like, I take trash bags home with me after I do a wedding for myself to sort through it at home and and to compost and to reuse and to save. I think just logistically, bigger companies that have multiple weddings in a weekend, it's a convenience thing. So some people, even though they'd like to be more sustainable, they during the season you don't have much time to think about these things. So if you can't quite afford or haven't organized in a way just yet that you have staff to care about these things for you, the convenience of having the flower foam, the convenience of throwing things away or just like leaving all your vases, buying them new so that you don't have to spend the time to really find the sourcing for your vases, for your vessels, always buying things new. That's definitely a thing that I think some people will probably stick with because they're just so busy and maybe just don't have the wherewithal to like steer away from that. But I think there's, as far as the new florists coming in, especially over the pandemic, tons of new people, younger people that just give more of a shit about the environment. And I think part of that's due to like literally like climate change and the weather and it being right in front of your eyes. I think it's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
So that's a positive from at least like the younger generation and the newer people starting. And I mean, I'm not that old yet, but but even for me, I mean, like I said in my beginning about 7, 8 years ago, my thoughts, even though it was a little bit in the front of my mind from the place I worked with, I didn't have it as like a core value or anything like that. It was just what I was used to. Now it's kind of at that point where it's important to me and I'll say no to stuff that is spray painted or dyed or there's a time and a place for you to make a piece of art and for it not to be all biodegradable and that's just so is life.
Mhm.
But if I can help it in my designs, then I try and do the things that I can. So which which leads to florist and my many ramblings on many jobs with other florists who are like, do you want to stay after and collect all the flowers that are only used for an hour if it's not inconvenient to the team? And the lead florist says, yeah, go for it. You can keep as much as you want after the event. And I'm like, awesome, score. That's how I got most of my supplies for all my first events. I worked for crazy hours from midnight till 4 a.m. breaking down weddings so that I could acquire chicken wire, make sure it didn't get thrown away, acquire water tubes, and massive amounts of drying flowers from going and sorting through from other people's trash, essentially.